Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before I play a clip from Hillary Clinton parroting a talking point that Sam Seder parroted, now Hillary knows better than this, so I got some information before you listen to the clip. Sam Seder, he's just a big dumb goof. So, but Hillary knows better. She knows it's a lie. And it was a whole red states have higher homicide rates than blue states without looking at the demographics, without looking at any county or city data, you know, just, right, like I said, nations that vote for Joe Biden have much higher homicide rates than nations that vote for Donald Trump. Because the homicide rate in the U.S. for 2021 and 2022 will collectively be higher, on average, than 2017 to 2020. Oh, we can't do that. You gotta look at states, they're different. Yep, and then you start drilling it down to county and city and all that. But that's hard for stupid people. So let's go through some data real quick before I play the clip of Hillary Clinton parroting an argument that Sam Seder parroted from Rachel Maddow, and I think Joe Scarborough excreted it as well. Okay, according to Illinois, according to the FBI, Illinois had a homicide rate 2018 to 2020 of about 7.5 per 100,000. The Illinois state data total had slightly more homicides than the FBI, not much. The homicide rate in East St. Louis and Chicago from 2018 to 2020 was 22.391 per 100,000. That's, excuse me, 23.391 per 100,000. And the Illinois homicide rate outside of Chicago and East St. Louis was 3.105 per 100,000. Look at that disparity. Like I've told you, it's St. Clair County and Cook County that are causing the issues in Illinois. Now, I found all the counties in Illinois that voted 60% or more for Donald Trump in 2020, or yeah, 2020 and 2016. There's a boatload of them. I'm not going to name them. See the links in the video description. Those counties collectively had 76 homicides, and then I got the population data from the Census Bureau, and their cumulative homicide rate from 2018 to 2020 was 1.93. So the uber Trump counties in Illinois have homicide rates much lower than the national average, the Illinois average, and much lower than the two jurisdictions that vote uber Democrat more than any other cities in Illinois. That's Chicago and East St. Louis, and those cities are indistinguishable from a demilitarized zone. How about Missouri? Missouri criminal homicide rate. I've been over this before. Keep beating the drum, folks, because the last 18 minutes of this video will be something I'll recently upload. So if you don't want to listen to that again, that's fine. How about Missouri? Criminal homicide rate from 2018 to 2020. The FBI had the rate pegged at 10.304 per 100,000, and Missouri state data had it at 10.38 per 100,000. That's really high. Oh, Missouri is a wet state. Oh, wet state. They call it the homicide. How about St. Louis City and Kansas City? Two uber Democrat enclaves in a state that overwhelmingly votes Republican. St. Louis City and Kansas City criminal homicide rate 2018 to 2020 was 45.995 per 100,000. So you can see who's pulling it up. Now, criminal homicide rate in Missouri, outside of St. Louis City and Kansas City, it's still kind of high, 4.923 per 100,000. That's lower than the national average, but not by much. I think it's about right at it. And the Missouri State Patrol had the Missouri rate outside of St. Louis City and Kansas City at 5.010. So that's still a little high. Now, if you take all the counties in Missouri that voted 60% or more for Donald Trump, or since he won Missouri by so much, I raised the level to 66%. I did that for California too, so you can't accuse me of being biased. When I looked at Biden counties in California, I went to 66%. Counties in Missouri that voted 66% or more for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020, the homicide rate for those counties from 2018 to 2020, they had 122 homicides. Their rate was 1.814 per 100,000, much lower than the rate outside of St. Louis City and Kansas City, much lower than the Missouri rate, much lower than the national rate. So you can see the two jurisdictions that are really yanking up the Missouri average are places that are uber Democrat and have lots of black-on-black homicide. But you probably already knew that. Now for Tennessee. Tennessee made it difficult because I'd have to look up every jurisdiction in every jerkwater county, so I wasn't going to do that. But I did look up the data for Shelby and Davidson counties according to their state data. Tennessee had a homicide rate, according to the FBI, of 8.1 per 100,000 from 2018 to 2020. And the Tennessee state data was almost on track on that. The difference in homicides was only 10. So 8.1 per 100,000 according to the FBI. Tennessee's a red state. Oh, they're going to vote for Republicans. They got high homicide rate. Shelby and Davidson counties, 2 of the 3. There's about 3 counties in Tennessee that vote uber Democrat. The rest of them are Republican, pretty much, except for when Obama ran. He got a handful more, but historically it's been 3. Now, the 2 really big ones are Shelby and Davidson. And you'll see the very few Democrats that go to the state legislature every year are usually sent from those 2 entities. That's the majority of them. Shelby and Davidson counties, that's Memphis and Nashville, from 2018 to 2020, had a homicide rate of 19.882 per 100,000, and Tennessee's homicide rate outside of Shelby and Davidson counties was 4.318 per 100,000. Have you seen this movie before? Now let's go to Texas. That's another Republican state. They vote for Republicans. The counties that voted 60% or more for the creep, Joe Biden, and Mrs. Bill Clinton, I can name those because there's not too many of them. Dallas, Dimmitt, El Paso, Presidio, Travis, Webb, and Zavala. Those counties had a collective homicides, 1,008 homicides from 2018 to 2020. And you know what their homicide rate was? 6.661 per 100,000. That's high. That's not East St. Louis, Chicago high, but it's high. Now, the counties in Texas that voted 60% or more for Donald Trump in 2020 and 2016, they collectively had 959 homicides. I'm not going to name them all because there's a boatload of them. And their homicide rate was 3.989 per 100,000 from 2018 to 2020. So there you go again. How about another red state? Arkansas. They're a red state, aren't they? Arkansas, you vote for Republican. They got high homicide rate. FBI said Arkansas had a homicide rate of 8.614 per 100,000 from 2018 to 2020. The state data is not much different, 8.470. That's high. Criminal homicide rate for North Little Rock, Pine Bluff, and Little Rock, 3 Democrat enclaves in an overwhelmingly Republican state. Little Rock, North Little Rock, and Pine Bluff had a homicide rate from 2018 to 2020 of 24.931 per 100,000. Excuse me. The homicide rate in Arkansas outside of those cities, 6.751. Not nearly as high as that, but still pretty high. 6.751 according to the FBI and 6.591 according to the state data. So now we go get the counties in Arkansas. Since Donald Trump, he won Arkansas by such a large margin, I went with counties that voted 66% or more for him. There's a boatload of them. I'm not going to name them all. Just see links in the video description. I lay them all out for you. Those counties that voted twice for Donald Trump, 66% or more. So they're uber Republican counties in an uber Republican state. This is Republicanville. These are the most Republican people you'll ever meet. Those counties had a collective 154 homicides from 2018 to 2020. And then I got their population data from the Census Bureau, and their homicide rate was 4.583 per 100,000. That's kind of high, not real high, but it's a heck of a lot lower than the Democrat enclaves there. It's lower than the Arkansas average. So you can see just from those examples, there's a lot of uber Republican states that have high homicide rates, and I even threw Illinois in there as another example, and that's a good one. Uber Republican states, Illinois is not a Republican state, I understand. But it's not the Republican counties or cities that are pulling the average up. And I've also got homicide data there if you want to dig through that. I got a lot of pages of that. You can see a whole lot of black-on-black homicide in places like Missouri and Arkansas. And it's kind of sad, but it's true. So now to the clip where Hillary Clinton parroted Sam Seder's argument that he parroted from Rachel Mandow's rear end or something.
I had mentioned this earlier in the week. We've been talking about this. And we can maybe return to this. I want to put a pin in this clip because I don't want to get diverted into the future talk too much here. Hillary Clinton is all of a sudden, I'm starting to notice Hillary Clinton's popping up a lot for somebody who's supposed to be going for walks in the woods, drinking wine, hanging with the grandkids, doing yoga, etc. Seeing her used as a surrogate a lot here and there's a Biden administration that we know is a little rocky. I'm just saying, interesting stuff. But here she is making this argument you're hearing from a lot of Democrats right now. Understand this. Do not forget, they gaslit you and said that crime was not higher, crime was not worse. And they did that for 18 solid months of the Biden administration. We're really almost now 2 years, more than 18 months. But in the last couple of months, they've realized, we've got a problem. So here is Hillary telling everybody that the states with the highest crime levels are run by Republicans. Play it.
Crime should be a concern. I mean, I don't care where it happens or what it is. I want people to be safe. That's not the Republicans' argument, because, of course, if you look at real crime statistics, which they're not interested in examining, the states with the highest crime levels are states run by Republicans. That's just a fact. We saw that very clearly in the recent debate in Oklahoma for the governorship when the Democratic candidate said, wait a minute, the crime rate in Oklahoma is higher than it is in New York, and nobody wanted to believe that. They don't want to solve a problem, whether it's crime, inflation, or anything else. They just want an issue. When given a chance to govern, they don't want the responsibility.
Okay, this is total crap. And Clay and I have explained, I mean, the basic version of this, and there's something else I want to get to on the crime front, Clay, but I just wanted to hand this to you because you've been making this argument very loudly, and it's important for everyone to know. The state level actually isn't really where you can do that much about crime. Lee Zeldin's going to fire a bad prosecutor in New York City. There are things that, if he wins, which I say he will, but there are things that can be done. But really what we're talking about when we're discussing defund the police, when we're discussing changing procedures, bad prosecutors, it is cities. And when you look at the cities driving crime, you look at St. Louis, you look at New Orleans, you look at Baltimore, you look at these cities, Chicago, with out-of-control crime, they are all Democrat-controlled cities, and in many cases have been for 50 years, 70 years.
Decades, Buck, and that's what I was going to hit with. They're trying to say, it's these red states. Here's the 25 counties with the most homicides over the last 3-4 years. All right, really quickly. St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, Shelby County, which is Memphis, Philadelphia County, obviously, Birmingham, which is Jefferson, D.C., Washington, D.C., Kansas City, which is Jackson, Missouri, Indianapolis, Wayne County, which is Detroit, Milwaukee County, which is obviously Milwaukee, Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, Cook County, which is Chicago, Fulton County, which is Atlanta, Franklin County, which is Columbus, Harris County, which is Houston, Dallas County, which is obviously in Texas, San Antonio, Behar County, I believe, Miami-Dade, San Bernardino, all of these places. I could keep running down, L.A., Phoenix, Fort Worth, Vegas. That's the top 25 according to this list. You know what all 25 of those have in common? They all have Democrat leaders, and they're overwhelmingly blue cities that have the crime rate. So when Hillary says, the states are Republican states, no. The cities are blue cities, which is where the crime is coming from. I'm sure the governors of all those states would love to clean up that crime. They can't do that much because Democrats keep winning power.
And in case anyone's thinking, and this is where I wanted to point this out, I think it's so important, and it's why you need to get out there. It's why everyone needs to mobilize to vote and to really send this message, as well as take power out. This isn't just about the optics. This is take power out of the hands of these lunatics, of these left-wing, socialist, soft-on-crime Democrats, everywhere you can. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, they, Clay, they realize they made a mistake. The libs we've had enough excess or additional to the expected year, robberies, murders, rapes, assaults. They're getting the picture. The libs live enough in reality that they're going to change. Let me explain to you really quickly, everyone, that is not true. Kathy Hochul sending additional police into the subway system is a last-minute ploy to save her job. They have not repudiated the left-wing en masse incarceration, defund police, social justice first ideology at all. And I give you right now in Washington, D.C., Clay, which is 95% Democrat, might even be higher, might even be more like 97 now, but a 95% Democrat enclave. The D.C. criminal code is going through the D.C. City Council and has been through a revamp, if you will, a massive rewrite. And does anyone want to guess? D.C., which has high crime rate, high violent crime rate, high crime rate, been getting worse in recent years. Clay, they are eliminating most mandatory sentences for crimes. They're allowing for jury trials for all misdemeanor crimes pretty much. They're reducing maximum penalties for carjackings and robberies. They're actually going in the direction of making it softer on crime in a city already with a massive crime problem. My friends, they're doing this in D.C. right now. You know why? Because D.C. isn't a place where Republicans are on the verge of taking power. They have not changed their minds, Clay. They have not decided they were wrong.
And the justification for why they're doing it in D.C. is because too many black criminals are being arrested. That's the legitimate justification. They're saying this is equity-based. So as crime is skyrocketing, they are looking around in Washington, D.C., a city that both you and I have lived in at different points of our life. We talked earlier about Union Station and how many different parts of D.C. that had become fabulous are now decrepit under Democrat rule. And you look at what's going on there, and I said this earlier today on Fox News with Harris Faulkner, Buck, and I've said it on this show for a long time. Being concerned that you're too tough on crime is a luxury of a low-crime environment.
Well, now I'm going to play an 18-plus minute clip I previously recorded and uploaded on YouTube and Rumble in response to some doofus in Iowa who says, we're not safe anywhere. And I cover in that, and I've got a lot of data, lots of data. Cover some data related to states and the percentage of counties with no homicides, and then I even extrapolated further, throwing out counties with no homicides and one homicide. And then that will further allow us to drill down to figure out that it's about, if you took all counties in the U.S. and put them in groups of 10, a decile, it'd be the top 10% where the vast majority of the homicide is occurring. And there's about 2/3 of counties in the U.S., big give or take, have less than 2 homicides. So, and then I also demonstrate that Iowa, a very low homicide state, there are a couple areas in Iowa that have homicide rates well above the national average, and they're lean Democrat or break-even cities and counties. So I got all the data for that, so you can dig through that at your leisure. But they're not uber Republican. And a little fun fact that I'll cover: about 2/3 to 3/4 of Iowa's counties in a given year have 0 homicides. So this, we're not safe anywhere, that's bullcrap. So anyway, here's the clip. Enjoy. Okay, folks, now a further and complete debunking and decimation of Black Hawk County, Iowa Supervisor Chris Schwartz said back in July, we're not safe anywhere, you know, so we got to take everybody's guns away, even from law-abiding people like myself that live in rural areas that aren't going to give them up. He's projecting. If I lived in Waterloo, I might think it's not very safe either, because if you've been to Waterloo, Iowa lately, well, don't waste your time. But Waterloo has a homicide rate that's really high by Iowa standards, and even high by national standards. I'm sure, I don't even know if he knows that. He may be so stupid. Well, he might just be projecting Waterloo onto the rest of the country. And in fact, the jurisdictions in Iowa that are the most violent are usually Democrat-run and diverse. We'll get to that. But his BS about being not safe anywhere, only an idiot or someone who's uneducated or a liar would say that. I'll let you determine whether he's a liar or he's stupid. But I went through I tried to get a good sample size, because John Lott wrote an essay a while back, several years ago, from 1977 to 2000, when the homicide rate was much higher than it's been the last, say, from 2000 to 2020. In any given year, about 70% of U.S. counties had no homicides. So the homicides were more concentrated in the, Democrat-run cesspools like Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland, Dayton, Newark, etc., etc., etc. Now, that's changed a little bit. Now, the homicide rate now is much lower than it was in the 80s and early 90s. It's rising, though, over the last few years, and that's alarming. And the number of counties having homicides due to all the meth heads and drug addicts we have out there, that has increased some. But I wanted to find out, well, what's it look like today? So I went through the following states, and I either did 2020 and 2021, or 2020 and 2019, depending if they had their 2021 report out. And I did 2 years, found all the counties with no homicides. And I took the best year. I've got all the data there. I'll link to it. And you can check it out to see if I'm telling you the truth or not. And I did the following states: Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Montana, Utah, New York, Oregon, Maine, Florida, Arkansas, Missouri, Washington, California, Illinois, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Iowa, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, Texas, Idaho, and Arizona. That's a pretty good sample size. They had 1,568 counties. And I found out of those 1,568 counties, 704, or 44.89% of them, had 0 occurrences of murder / non-negligent manslaughter. Donald Trump won 79.97, or 563 of those counties, with 0 homicides in the 2020 election, where he received 60% or more of the vote. He had to get 60% or more. I didn't count. Excuse me, I bumped that. So again, 1,568 counties, 704 of them, 0 homicides. Trump won 563, or almost 80% of them. Extrapolating that out, there are 3,143 counties or county equivalents in the U.S. That would mean in a given year in recent history, 1,411, or 44.89% of U.S. counties have 0 homicides. Those 704 counties had a cumulative population of 15,860,621 for the years I selected. The states I selected, and I'm not going to read them off again. You can look at the data. They had a collective population of over 228.6 million. It was 68.98% of the entire U.S. population. So, extrapolating that out again, 6.93% of the fine folks living in these United States lived in counties with no homicides. That means in a given year, almost 23 million, now again, this was the ones with 0 homicides, almost 23 million people in the U.S. live in counties where there are no homicides. And then I mentioned that I could have gone further, included counties with 1 homicide, as there are numerous rural counties in America that have no homicides in most years, but the occasional heinous crime is committed. All those counties would add cumulatively millions and millions more to the grand total. So that BS about, oh, we're not safe anywhere is utter BS. It's something an idiot would say. So I did a bonus round. And I'll read all these off. In 2016, 73 of Iowa's 99 counties had 0 homicides. And I didn't add because it's hard to go through that data and find ones with 1 homicide. But anyway, in 2016, 73, in any given year, 66 to 75 of Iowa's 99 counties have 0 homicides. Well, where's this idiot getting this "we're not safe anywhere" crap from? You're safe. You're totally safe in about 70 counties in Iowa, but there's a few cities where you're not safe. So quit projecting. Of Utah's 29 counties, 17 of them, or 58%, had no homicides in 2016. An additional 5 counties had 1 homicide. And I went down the line here. I'll give you another example. Minnesota has 87 counties. In 2016, 62 of them had 0 homicides, and an additional 14 counties had 1 homicide. There are a boatload of counties in the U.S. that have 50,000 or less people, and you could put a 10-year block of data up, and there'd be like 4 years where they have 1 homicide, and then the other 6 they have none. There was a county in Texas when I was going through their data that had a homicide rate in the hundreds because it's a podunk county and they had 2 homicides. Most years they have 0. So when I took that sample size, the states I was able to find counties with 1 homicide where the data allowed me to easily find it. The states where I was able to find counties with 1 homicide had 1,088 counties collectively. Now, this is 2016 data, and if they didn't have it, I did 2017. So I did it again just to see. 739 of those counties, of those 1,088, 739, or 67.92% of those counties, had fewer than 2 homicides. So if you can go throw those out, and that'll let you whittle it down so you can figure out where the problem areas are. It's not everywhere. Like I say, I have to stress that. Only an idiot would say that. In any given year, over half the counties in the U.S., about half, it's a little less than half now. It was a lot more back in the 80s. In any given year, over half the counties in the U.S. have 0 homicides, and over 2/3 of them, over 2/3 of the counties in the U.S. have fewer than 2 homicides. The fact remains, the most dangerous cities and counties in America can be drilled down to 10% of the remaining counties after omitting all those with fewer than 2 homicides. It's not everywhere. As John Lott did, the most dangerous counties usually have just one city that is doing most of the damage, and you can narrow that down to a few districts or neighborhoods in that city. It's not everywhere. So Missouri, Tennessee, Illinois, and Delaware have high homicide rates, but it's a few cities in those states perpetrating most of the violence. I should read Illinois. We'll scroll back up here and find Illinois. Illinois in 2016, they've got 102 counties. 64 of them, or 62.7%, had no homicides. And an additional 17 counties had 1 homicide. So it's mostly St. Clair and Cook counties. It's not everywhere. Yes, lightning can strike anywhere once. But how about year after year after year in places like Kansas City, Chicago, Baltimore, Wilmington, Detroit, Houston, Flint, Gary, Newark, Memphis, St. Louis, Jackson, Birmingham, Petersburg, Richmond, Compton, Albuquerque, Atlanta, Buffalo, Rochester, etc. Lightning can strike anywhere once, but how about year after year after year and over again in cities like that? It's not, and again, remember, Donald Trump won most of those counties with no homicides with 60% or more of the vote. It's not uber-white rural counties won overwhelmingly by Donald Trump all over this great nation causing the Democrat crime wave. So now I'm going to shift to Iowa specifically. And you might want to look at the demographics of these cities. According to the FBI from 2016 to 2021, and I've got all this info so you can dig through it. I'm not going to read it out in detail. But from 2016 to 2021, according to the FBI, Iowa had a homicide rate of 2.194 per 100,000, well below the national average. According to the Iowa state data, there were 60 more homicides in that time period. It would push it up a little bit. I don't know why they were about 10 homicides up every year from the FBI, but for what it's worth. Iowa, of course, like most states, is not homogeneous. About 2/3 of Iowa's counties have 0 homicides in a given year. Some areas are dangerous. Most are not. So let's look at arrestees for murder / non-negligent manslaughter in Iowa 2016 to 2021. Uh-oh. And I got the link there and showed you how to do it. Of the 313 arrestees where the race of the arrestee was known in Iowa, 47.28% of the arrestees were black. According to the Census Bureau in 2020, Iowa was 4.3% black. Ouch. According to Iowa state data from 2016 to 2021, of the 473 victims where the race of the victim was known of homicide, 39.54% of the victims, or 191, were black. According to the FBI, of the 503 homicide offenders in Iowa 2016 to 2021, where the race of the assailant is known, 48.1%, or 242 of the arrestees, were black. Of the 468 victims of homicide in Iowa, according to the FBI, 2016 to 2021, 40.38%, or 189 of the victims, were, guess what? Black. And that's, whose fault is that? The fact they probably didn't have a dad. That's probably their dad's fault. So, now let's go to some more uncomfortable data. This is going to make some people grind their yellow teeth. Johnson County, Iowa. Let's look at Johnson County, Iowa, Story County, Lynn, Polk, and Black Hawk County. Hello, Chris Schwartz, Black Hawk County. All right. So we look at those counties had 233 occurrences of murder / non-negligent manslaughter from 2016 to 2021. And I got their population data from the Census Bureau, and those counties had a homicide rate of 3.521 per 100,000. That's lower than the national average, but much higher than the Iowa average. So they're the ones pulling it up. Again, that's Johnson, Story, Lynn, Polk, and Black Hawk. Now let's drill down to some of the most homicide-riddled cities in Iowa. And I explain all this, so I'm not going to go through it all in great detail why I added them. I will be adding Davenport. Council Bluffs is a problem area within Pottawatomie County, so they will be included as well. The individual cities I will now be examining: Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Davenport, Ames, Council Bluffs, and Iowa City. Those entities had 246 homicides. I even got local data too, if you want to look at that, which was sometimes helpful and sometimes not. Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Davenport, Ames, Council Bluffs, and Iowa City had 246 homicides from 2016 to 2021. That's 50.93% of all Iowa homicides compared to the state data. And they had a homicide rate of 5.675 per 100,000, much, much higher than the Iowa state average and even higher than the national average in that time frame. Ouch. And then I added Fort Dodge. Fort Dodge from 2016 to 2021 had a homicide rate of 7.513 per 100,000. That's sky high. If I now add Fort Dodge to Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, Davenport, Ames, Council Bluffs, and Iowa City, homicide rate for those entities, 2016 to 2021, 5.735 per 100,000. That decisively exceeds the national average for that time frame. Those jurisdictions are less than 24% of Iowa's population, but they have 53.2% of Iowa's homicides. How about arrests for murder and non-negligent manslaughter in Black Hawk, Black Hawk, Johnson, Lynn, Polk, and Story counties, 2016 to 2021. Here we go. Chris Schwartz. I'm going to give this to other people too, so if I'm talking to Chris Schwartz, ignore that. I might be talking to somebody else because I'm going to upload this for another one. Of the 163 arrests for that offense in Black Hawk, Johnson, Lynn, Polk, and Story counties, 163 arrests, 57.05% of the arrestees were black. Uh-oh. Can you believe that? As I presumed, and not gratuitously, the vast majority of the great state of Iowa is as safe as a baby in its mother's arms because we don't largely demonize police or gun owners. And what do you think of that amendment that got added to the Iowa Constitution? It won by about 30 points. How do you like that, Democrats? Most of Iowa does not have a hood rat meth head culture, but the worst areas in Iowa have homicide rates above the national average. So let's can this red states have higher homicide rates than blue states crap that's tossed around at the local pool hall. Iowa has a homicide rate. It's a red state. Homicide rate much lower than national average in any given year. But the worst areas in Iowa either lean Democrat or run by Democrats and have high homicide rates. So there you go. And let's see, what else did I want to... I think that about covers it. I went through some data on proving most of those areas are Democrat-leaning. And I think that does it, actually. I've got a whole bunch of data in there. I even found some stuff from the CDC that they publish about homicide rates. And you won't be surprised. I wish they had homicide... They went over victims, but I wish they had the data for who was the perpetrator. But put it this way, back in even the 1930s, all the way through the 40s and 50s and 60s, and you'll have to, if you read this, you'll have to be excused, they use the word Negro a lot of times instead of black person. So don't get too butthurt over that. But anyways, the rate of death that young black men were dying from homicide back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s is astronomical. Astronomical. It's sad. So it's gone down a lot since then. So some things don't change. You know what I mean? And if they had data for who was killing, who was doing all the killing, like if all the black men that were murdered in the 30s, 40s, 50s, who was the perpetrator most of the time? Probably another black man. So some things don't change. The only thing that's changed is the U.S. homicide rate has had peaks, many peaks and valleys over the last 110 years. So I think I've covered all the data I want to cover. Basically, again, it doesn't matter if it's a red state with a high homicide rate or a blue state with a high homicide rate or a red state with a low homicide rate or blue state with a low homicide rate. The counties that have 0 or 1 homicide in any given year, and there's probably a lot of them in any given state. I've got plenty of examples of that. They were probably won by Donald Trump by 60% or more. The Republicans probably win most of the elections there. And the problem areas in that state, like Illinois, are a couple of counties. In Tennessee, it's a couple counties. In Delaware, it's 1 city and 1 county. In Missouri, it's a couple cities. I'll give you if you've listened to my stuff, my rants and raves on this before, you know what I'm talking about. So this whole red states have higher homicide rates than blue states, you need to drill it down to the county and then start going into the cities. John Lott's had a lot of data on that, which I've elucidated before. You could go to Indianapolis. It's got a high homicide rate, but most of the city is safe. But there's a few neighborhoods you don't want to go in, especially if you're white and it's after dark. Sad but true. So, like I said, the lowest, Iowa's got an uber low homicide rate. If you take those problem cities out of Iowa, Iowa has basically a homicide rate that goes down to 0, and 60 to 75% of Iowa's counties have no homicides in a given year. So that, again, debunks all this bull crap that I'm hearing people regurgitate because they have a lot of free time. It's stupid, it's dumb, it's idiotic, it's not factual. So just keep beating the drum. These idiots are going to keep repeating it and using their uber free time to repeat nonsense, and you can forward this information to them. Check the links in the video description. Have a nice day, and don't thank me now for the smackdown.